Welcome to the webinar, everybody. I'm going to take just a second to go over some basics and introduce our speaker, and then we'll get started. Just as some reminders, we have muted everybody so that we can decrease some of the background noise. If you have any questions or comments, utilize the chat box or the question box, and throughout the presentation, we'll pause periodically and I will go over those questions with Mary. So again, everybody is muted. We're not using the audio option for questions. Remember to check the question box or the chat box if you have something that you'd like to say or ask. And now I'm going to introduce our presenter, Mary Delansky. She is the director of the QSEN Institute at the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing at Case Western Reserve University. And she is also the Associate Director of VA Quality Scholars Program. So Mary, I am going to turn this over to you here in just a second.
All right, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. All right, I was going to use my phone, but I realized that probably everyone is muted, so you won't be able to hear me using my phone. So I will then use the audio from your end. So now I am going to be sharing my slides. There we go. So I'm delighted to be here with all of you. Are the slides?
Yep, I can see your screen. I can see the slides.
Okay, excellent. And I love quality and safety, and it has been my passion pretty much my whole nursing career. And I've gone back to school to study more and to learn more and to become a leader in the movement so that we can ensure that our patients always receive care that is safe and of high quality. And I received a lot of opportunities in this area in quality and safety, and one of them is to be the director of QSEN Institute, which is the Quality Safety Education for Nurses. And today I wanted to share about the QSEN Institute and the progress that we have been making with QSEN and the integration of not just having quality and safety education be focused on in nursing schools and nursing students, but to transition to having education be infiltrated into continuing education and also education in hospitals. So the QSEN started in 2007. It was funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for $6.5 million. The goal was to address the challenge of really preparing future nurses with the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary to continuously improve the quality and safety of healthcare systems in which they worked. The reason why the QSEN initiative started was because the founders were observing that many faculty in schools of nursing did not have or understand or were not exposed to contemporary quality and safety competencies or methods. And they believed that by providing this resource, that faculty could become more knowledgeable, and then they would be able to spread that to their students. As you have noted, the QSEN Institute has been, the QSEN has been around a while. It transitioned to Case Western Reserve University in 2012, and the goal currently is to provide comprehensive competency-based resources to empower nurses and other healthcare professionals with the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary. So we have moved beyond just nursing students to really empowering all nurses so that we can all be leaders at the front line to ensure continuously improving quality and safety. Currently, our vision is to improve quality and safety of healthcare through education, practice, and scholarship. And our vision is to inspire healthcare professionals to put quality and safety as core values to guide their work. And again, you may be noting that now we're talking about all health professionals and not just nurses in education, but every nurse in practice. So today I wanted to share why QSEN, and why is it important for nurses and other healthcare professionals to focus on quality and safety. And then we'll talk about the QSEN competencies in a little more detail, because it has been a while since we have done our initial sessions on the quality and safety competencies, and then to look at the past of the QSEN movement, currently what is happening, and then what the future may hold for quality and safety. So the history of quality, why really this is a target for us as nurses, started about 1999 with the reports of Two Hair is Human and Crossing the Quality Chasm. And these books that were reports that were published in these areas shaped our modern safety conversation. So as you can see, some of you maybe were born in this time, and so you might note that this movement really isn't that old. Then I think the next historical piece on quality was the triple aim, and that was from a paper written by Don Berwick, who was the president of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement for 30 years. And his focus of that article was that we should really focus on this triple aim, which is really better health for all patients, and also a better healthcare system, so that our healthcare system is set up to always deliver high quality care. And the third aim was lower cost. Notably, cost is a huge component of our healthcare systems. And just as an aside, an area where we as nurses could focus more and demonstrate more how our nursing care reduces costs. The next report in quality was in the Annals of Family Medicine, where they started to talk about a quadruple aim, because what we were experiencing was many healthcare providers who were becoming burned out, and many instances of even suicide due to the pressures of care delivery. And so the research demonstrated that if you have burned out providers and frontline professionals, care delivery will be poor. And so we have to focus on these in order to ensure good quality care. And then the last document that has been important was this document on the importance from the National Patient Safety Foundation, in which they talked a lot about the safety culture and the no blame environment, and in the transparency of reporting errors so that we can always learn from our errors and improve the care forward. So again, why are we focusing on QSEN and quality and safety in our healthcare systems? Because we know that many people die from medical mistakes in our hospitals and even in our communities. There has been a publication in 2015 in the New England Journal of Medicine by a surgeon, Dr. Macri, who in his estimates of looking at data reported that medical mistakes are the third leading cause of death in our country to date. Again, this was an estimate, but it is really well articulated in many of our venues that this is of high importance and high priority, and that we must think about how we can prevent medical errors from occurring. I'd like for all of you on the call also to think about situations when you're a nurse where you see there are vulnerabilities in our systems of when potential errors could be made and where we could lead improvement efforts. Also would like for you all to reflect about personal experiences of when you or a family member were in a hospital and experiencing poor care coordination, poor communication, maybe the wrong medication, in which you could possibly identify ways in which the system could have prevented these situations. I also think it's really important as nurses that we know, like, what is quality? I think we use that word very, very easily, and maybe it's important to focus on what is quality. And obviously, quality care is safe care, and I did mention that the medical errors have been reported as the third leading cause of death. But that quality also is effective care, that our care should be science-based. Here's where we learn a lot about evidence-based practice, or EBP, and how we need to ensure that we implement evidence-based practice in our nursing care on a day-to-day basis. And the third is efficient care, that care and services should be cost-effective. Again, I think as nurses, we don't think much about this domain of quality, that our care should be cost-effective. But to state my personal opinion, I believe that in nursing schools and in our performance evaluations, we really should be held to ensuring that the care we are delivering is cost effective. And that would take a lot of effort in our professional development across academia and clinical practice. But I do believe that it is a huge lever in our power in nursing to create change. The fourth dimension of quality is timely care, that there are no waits or delays should occur in receiving care. And I work at in hospitals in which there are major delays in care, and we really are working very hard to eliminate these. And then the fifth dimension is patient-centeredness. And here's where we focus on ensuring that our patients are co-producing care with us. The whiteboard is a great example in hospitals currently where the whiteboard is tailored to that patient's specific needs and what matters to them. In addition, the bedside rounds are another key component of having patient-centered care. I've heard reports in healthcare there's much resistance of nurses providing bedside handoffs, but it is a measure of quality that if we engage in these patient-centered interventions, our care quality will be better. So that might be a piece of information that we can share with our frontline staff so that they become more engaged to those interventions. And then the last dimension of quality is equitable care, and that the belief that disparities in care need to be eradicated. And we still, to this day, have very many geographic situations in which care is not equitable. So we're working on those. Personally, I am very involved in quality and safety because of my own personal journey and situations or examples of when I was in as a patient or a customer with some of my family members, and care was very disappointing. And these situations really have motivated me to dedicate a lot of time and energy to this area, because I believe that nurses can lead improvement and can be the change that is needed. I'm sure that you have stories of your own. If we pause and reflect, these stories become highlighted and can be applied to our daily work so that we can remember these narratives to help us to make good choices in our care delivery. Some of the stories from the literature are the Quaid twins, in which Dennis Quaid, the movie star's children, received the wrong dose of anticoagulant. The Josie King story, you may have seen this video or movie on our website. It also has been highlighted in the story of, or the new documentary To Err Is Human, about a little girl who died in a hospital due to dehydration. The Helen Haskell story with her son who died, and Helen now has devoted her whole life to the focus of raising awareness about errors in healthcare and finding solutions as to how we can improve. And then in Cleveland, the Emily Jerry story, in which a little girl died due to an overdose of a chemotherapeutic medication. And all of these stories, I think, highlight this issue of importance in our work as nurses. And as nurses, because we are so driven through our hearts and souls in the work that we do, are our true north for why we are focusing on quality and safety and why QSEN came in. Another reason for why QSEN is because nurses make up 71% of the healthcare workforce. And that means that we can make a huge difference if we collectively had demonstration of competence in quality and safety, and that we united in our efforts to improve care. So that leads us to then the second part of this presentation, which are the specific QSEN competencies. Again, these competencies were developed back in 2005 and were, I would say, influenced by the Institute of Medicine, who had published a report on 5 dimensions of quality, which they included as teamwork and collaboration, evidence-based practice, quality improvement, informatics. And those 5 Institute of Medicine competencies were embraced by the nursing leaders who started QSEN, but the nursing leaders also thought we should add safety. And so safety was the 6th competency that was added. So here are the 6 QSEN competencies. And at the time of development, they created two versions. One was the pre-licensure version, or what a nurse in practice should demonstrate. And then they also produced the advanced practice version, in which guided advanced practice nursing. Notably, the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, a little later on, I think looked at the advanced practice nursing competencies and then did a second version of those. But the original version of the QSEN competencies are still in place. And potentially the reason why is because we really have not achieved them in practice today, nor in nursing schools. So we still have some work to do. And before updating the competencies, we would like to demonstrate that we can achieve the competencies as they are written. So here's an example of the quality improvement competency. And you can see that at the top is the definition using data. So that means that every frontline nurses has access to data to help them as frontline nurses to monitor the outcomes of care processes that they're involved in delivering. And that every frontline nurse has improvement methods to design and test changes to improve the quality and healthcare of the system in which they work. So these are for frontline nurses, that they need to have these skills to make care better. Every competency has a knowledge and a skill and an attitude component. And I think the attitude component is so very helpful because many times we know what to do and many times we have the skills to do it, but we don't have the attitude to make that change. And so I think that attitudes are really a key. If we look at the knowledge for quality improvement, which notably is one of our weakest competencies, well, we have done some research studies across the country to demonstrate that this is probably where we really can impact quite a bit in healthcare practice today and also in schools of nursing. That every nurse would be able to describe strategies for learning about the outcomes of care in settings in which they're engaged in practice. So every nurse would know what are the outcomes they're trying to achieve in the care they're delivering. And that every nurse is a part of a system of care, and that these systems of care and processes affect the outcomes of our patients. And another one is knowing and having data and being able to look at variation in data and being able to measure the care delivery. And then describing approaches for changing processes of care. I think most of the things that we do in nursing are not evidence-based. We do not use implementation science strategies to promote change. And therefore, only 20 to 40% of our change initiatives are successful and sustained. So we in nursing need to start upping our game on knowledge in quality improvement. Skills is the second dimension for this quality improvement competency. And you can see that frontline nurses need to have tools. They need to be able to create flowcharts and be able to create cause-effect diagrams so that they can really look at that system of care in which they're working so that they can analyze the reasons why we had bad outcomes. One example of this would be fall huddles. So when a patient falls, that there's a small data collection tool that the nurses on the unit have to write down the context, the conditions, and the variables as to why that person fell, and that those nurses then can collect that data and create a root cause analysis and look in the past month or two, merge the data to say, on our unit, here's why these people fell, and here are the commonalities, and here are the interventions that we can do here on our unit to ensure that our patients do not fall. And then our nurses at the front line should be able to identify gaps between what is happening on their unit and what's best practice. And they should be able to do some small tests of change, something that they could carry out in 1 week, where they might say, well, we think that if we do vigilantly hourly rounds and purposefully look to ensure that the call bell is there and that the patient has access to that call bell, then we think that we're going to make an impact on our falls and do some plan, do, study, act. So these are some applications of these competencies that we can do today that would impact our quality and safety delivery. So I want to go over the other competencies and highlight how these competencies are so important in practice today. And some of you on the call may also be in academia, and you can, as faculty, can appreciate the importance that we have continuity of these competencies from education to new graduates and nurses in practice. And the first patient-centered care competency then is having that patient in control and full partner, in that the healthcare professionals respect that patient's preferences and values and needs, so that we always ask the patients what matters to you and how can we ensure that what we do as nurses meets those needs of the patient. And I gave some already examples of the whiteboards and the bedside rounds as examples of this. The next competency is teamwork and collaboration. And here is where we want to achieve high quality patient outcomes by effectively communicating with nurses and other professionals, and having mutual respect of other professionals, and that we make decisions collaboratively. This is a key component in the analysis of errors that occur in healthcare. Year after year, the most prominent reason for why errors occur is because of poor communication. Now, notably, communication could be enhanced by our electronic health records, but oftentimes the electronic health record is also an area for errors. So we need, as collective professionals, to think about how we can work better in teams. You can probably think in your current work and reflect on some observations of potential errors or possibly real errors when safe handoffs were the reason, or someone just did not communicate to the next shift coming on of a situation. I think that part of the teamwork issues in healthcare today is that we don't acknowledge other team members' contributions. That as RNs, sometimes we don't appreciate our LPN's contributions. Sometimes we don't appreciate the secretary at the desk or the environmental service person and how they can contribute to the quality care. Notably, also, a big issue with teamwork and collaboration is conflict management. In many of the improvement projects that I am involved in, my observation is that people avoid conflict, that when someone doesn't do what their role is on a team, very few people stand up and engage in conversation and say to the person, you did not fulfill your role here, and we need to talk about that because the patients are at risk because we're not all participating and completing the roles that are necessary to ensure high quality safe care. Now, the Team Steps initiative really has helped with a lot of important, I would say, facilitators of communication, and one of them is CUS, and that is helping people to raise their concern in a dialogue when there is ensuing conflict. And so CUS stands for I'm concerned, I'm uncomfortable, and this is a safety issue. And that would be in hospitals or in schools of nursing where there are team steps certified and team steps culture is integrated. Everyone would know that when someone is using cuss, like they need to be heard. This is, I guess, reflective of what teamwork and collaboration truly is. And what teamwork and communication and collaboration truly is where everybody can share their views and everybody hears the views of others, and that everybody is willing to negotiate for the common good of the patient. So these are very important competencies in our work as we engage in patient care. EBP is the third competency, and you all are EBP'd, probably evidence-based practice. I don't want to say to death, but it seems to me in the institutions I'm in that everyone is highly focused on EBP and integration of this into our work. But what I'd like to have us reflect on is that we don't have much standard and structured ways of implementing evidence into practice. And so we as nurses need to embrace the standards of implementation science, because actually there are about 75 evidence-based, and I hate to use that word again, but evidence-based strategies that demonstrate that if you do these things, then evidence will be implemented into practice. So that's a call to action again for us as nurses to use implementation science and strategies in our practice as we integrate evidence. And I know I talked quite a bit about quality improvement already. And again, this is one of our weakest competencies. But if every nurse at the front line could be quality improvement competent, just think of the changes that we could make in healthcare. This is actually part of the structure of high reliability organizations. So I know in our area in Cleveland, 3 of our hospitals are on the high reliability organization journey. And it is key that nurses at the front line in a high reliable organization are quality improvement ready and quality improvement competent. That nurses can look at the data and analyze the data and make changes that are successful and sustained. I believe that every healthcare professional should go to work to not just do their work, but always think about how to improve that system in which they work. And this is really key to the QSEN competencies, that we not just deliver individual care to our patients, but that we stand back and look at the system in which we are working with our colleagues from other professionals and think about how that system could be improved. And this is a very important dimension of the QSEN competencies, but most specifically related to safety. So when we think about improving safety, it's imperative that we look at the system, because no one goes to work to cause harm to a patient. Most people go to work because they want to do good. Most of the harm or safety problems in our delivery today are because of the system. It's usually a systems issue that leads to the fact that that error was made. So as nurses, we need to be engaged more in this root cause analysis, which is a tool to help us to look at the system and to think about how our performance is really impaired by such things as workarounds. Now, I know we often think workarounds are good, that we are very clever and creative and that we can work around a system that's not serving us well. But the data and the research shows that most workarounds are opportunities for errors to be made. So for example, if an electronic device that is there to aim to create avoidance of errors for medication administration and the device does not work, like not using that device is putting the patient at risk. All right, the last competency is informatics, and this by far is the weakest competency. And this is using information technology to manage knowledge and mitigate error and to help us with decision making. Again, the informatics is one of the weakest competencies, we need more nurses who are actually educated in informatics and who are have a role in hospitals and in outpatient settings that are really looking at informatics and how that informatics can assist us as nurses to deliver high quality care. And I think there's a lot of stories we could tell about errors in informatics, like cutting and pasting in our EHRs. And there are a lot of stories about how informatics can really help us, and technology can help us to alleviate errors. And some of them are with the medication administration devices that we use. So where we've been so far in our talk today is the why QSEN, so why do we need to focus on quality and safety, and then the QSEN competencies and how these competencies are so very important, not just in teaching nursing students and not just in nurse residency programs, but for every nurse at the front line. And the other important piece we will talk about now is the QSEN movement. How did this start in the past? What presently are we doing with QSEN as a resource to all of you? And what might be some future innovations that we can make as an institution or a community of nurses who are very passionate about improving quality and safety. So what can we do in the future to make care better? So first is the past. I alluded to some of the past already, that QSEN started in and was birthed in 2005. So that's already over 10 years ago, and we still have much work to do. In the start of the QSEN in the birth, we can think about the Erickson's developmental tasks at this time, and Eric would have said that the birth is really building trust. And the competencies were started just for pre-licensure programs. And Dr. Linda Cronenwet, who was the project director for QSEN, said that it will be an inspiration to change what and how we teach future professionals. And we have actually had success in that across our country. Moving along in some of the history of QSEN, phase 2 started in 2007, and we can think of this as the infancy of this movement. And Erickson would have said it's when we're becoming autonomous. We thought that QSEN at this point would reshape professional identity formation in nursing so that nurses would be committed to quality and safety competencies as a part of their becoming a nurse. And at this time in 2007, they had 16 pilot schools who started to implement the competencies into their curriculum. They started a teaching strategies database so that faculty could submit their teaching or curriculum or educational activities so that they would share what they're doing in their schools with the nurses across the nation. So any nurse faculty could go onto the website and look at the strategies and then kind of say, oh, that's a really interesting way to teach that. I'm going to use that, and then use the strategy in their own school of nursing. Also at this time, there were many resources put on a website, and that was the beginning pieces of QSEN. As it evolved over to 2009, which Erickson would describe as toddlerhood, so we were taking the initiative to lead more at this time, the AACN, the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, did some regional meetings teaching faculty about the competencies and how they could teach them, getting them familiar with the website and the teaching strategies database. And then also graduate competencies were created, and there was this partnership with the Veterans Affairs and the VA in their Quality Scholars Fellowship program, where nurses were integrated and allowed to participate. Prior to 2009, the VA Quality Scholars Program was all physicians. So for the last 10 years, it has allowed entrance into the program the nurse pre-doctorates, and they can be DNP or PhD, and then postdoctorates. So it's a 2-year pre-doctoral or postdoctoral program for nurses to get them to be scholars of quality science and quality improvement science. As QSEN got a little bit older, we moved into its competence phase, like pre-adolescence or early childhood. And at this time, the AACN redid the competencies and provided much more faculty development. So on their website, they have great resources for how to get faculty cued into quality and safety competencies. The leaders in the beginning, the main leader was Linda Cronenwet, and Dr. Shirley Moore, who is retired now from Case Western Reserve University, was one of the early leaders. Others were Joanne Dish, Jane Barnsteiner, Jean Johnson, Glenn Sherwood. There were many, many early leaders in this movement. They did many publications in premier journals such as Nursing Outlook, and then also Nurse Educator. And they published many books that have now gone into their second and third editions. And the publications really helped to spread the competencies across the country. In addition, other accomplishments that have been important is that the QSEN competencies are now, or have been, the foundation of the National Councils of Nursing residency programs, the NCSBN, the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. They also, QSEN competencies have been integrated in many specialty organization competencies because the specialty organizations such as the AORN, the American Association of Critical Care Nurses, the oncology nurses, they really saw that these competencies that were originally developed for schools of nursing were very important in their professional organizational growth of their nurses. Notably, the undergraduate and graduate essentials that were developed by the AACN were very much aligned with the QSEN competencies, and QSEN competencies are integrated into the NCLEX exam. So I think 20% of the NCLEX exam measures quality and safety competencies of new graduates. As I alluded to earlier, in 2012, QSEN transitioned from the University of North Carolina because the Robert Wood Johnson funded grant ended, and we took on the QSEN in 2012, and we then coined the movement or the initiative as the QSEN Institute, demonstrating that we were sort of a national virtual institute for the community of nurses who are very much passionate about quality and safety. So we are moving now to Erickson's adolescent stage, where we are a little bit risky. We really wanted to think a little more broadly, to think how the QSEN competencies could be maybe more valued in practice. And so that's where it took us then on our journey at Case Western Reserve University to the present. We then decided that we were a collaborative of healthcare professionals focused on education, practice, and scholarship. So we didn't want to just be seen as nurses. We really wanted to start thinking about collaboration with other professionals because we knew that quality and safety depends on all healthcare professionals. And as I mentioned, our vision was to really make sure that all professionals had these core values to guide our work. So that when we communicated with physicians or other healthcare professionals, we could say, look, we're doing this because this is going to be the best for this patient at this time. Also, as adolescents, the QSEN Institute wanted to align with practice. So we actually had a lot of communications with the AONE and other leadership organizations saying that these competencies are important in practice too, that these competencies could be part of orientation of nurses. They could be part of their performance evaluations. They need to be part of orientation and all of nursing continuing education. So we were bold in saying that these need to be transitioned from academia now to practice. And it was met with resistance, but there have been some things that have helped us with this message. The first is the publication out of the University of San Francisco by our two colleagues, Lyle, and he did a crosswalk between the QSEN standards or competencies and the Joint Commission standards and the magnet at that time. And he really demonstrated that it all aligns. Like the QSEN competencies are aligning with important benchmarks in practice. So these were, I think, a huge help to raise awareness with chief nursing officers across the country that this aligns. And not to mention the fact that if the nursing students coming on nursing schools had this language, then to have the same language in practice would really help the continuity of our quality and safety competencies. So with that, in the past 7 years at Case Western Reserve, we have also thought about spread. So we developed task forces, which I'll show you the topics of the task forces later, because we thought if we could build coalitions across the country doing work in these areas, that the mission could be spread and sustained. We also developed regional centers for the same reason. We thought that if we could have centers in the country that were focusing on the QSEN competencies, we could sustain and spread the movement. We also expanded our website. Notably, the website is down today. So if you go to the website, it is down, but come back to the website on Monday. It will be up and running. And we wanted to expand teaching strategies to practice strategies. So to have a vehicle for nurses at the front line, or nurse managers, or clinical nurse specialists, or nurse educators to say, hey, we did this activity and it really helped and made these outcomes better. And we want to share it with all of you so that others across the country can make practice change or initiatives. So sharing some strategies is really a key to QSEN. We also have an annual international conference, so we also have international presence. The QSEN competencies have been taken up in the countries of Japan, Sweden, China, Germany, and a few others, in Canada. And we have international presence at our conference each year. And we also now are spreading out to collaborations and relationships with interprofessional organizations such as the medical, the ACGME, and the AAMC, which are medical organizations. Notably, QSEN participated in the Clinical Learning Environment Initiative, which is an interprofessional initiative to ready that clinical learning environment so that we are all improving the context of which we are teaching our students and the context in which we are teaching and having our health professionals practice. We also have done a few local conferences. One notable one was 2 years ago. We did a leadership conference and how important leadership is in quality and safety. And not just leadership from the manager or the executive level, but leadership at the front line. So how can we get nurses to stand up and speak out for what is right at that front line of care? And the other piece that we have been a little risky on is stating that these QSEN competencies are dependent on systems thinking, that we can no longer just provide vigilant, individualized care, that nurses at the front line need to be thinking about the systems of care and how to connect the dots. Connect the dots from what they do at the individual level to what is the outcome of that patient in a more general or population-based thing. So systems thinking has been big in the QSEN Institute. We created a systems thinking tool to measure this, and we have many actual publications now demonstrating that if you do focus on teaching systems thinking, that you can improve it. One notable publication is on using the game called Friday Night in the ER, and how playing that game can get people to think beyond that individual delivery of care to the system of care. Another way we have proposed to teach systems thinking is by using these continuums, where traditionally we have thought of healthcare delivery as a personal effort. So these are our nursing interventions, such as if we want to prevent pressure injury, that we would at the personal level turn your patient every 2 hours. But we want nurses to think beyond that and to think of this to connect to the system. So get the nurse to think about, all right, well, I want my colleagues to also turn and position the patient. So I'm going to post a note. And then I'm going to ask others about and talk about, like, what are their best practices that they're using? And then look at the ulcer rate, collect data on what is the rate, and then to compare the data of that nurse's unit with data from other units to ensure that they are really working to the top of their performance. So those are some of our risky things that we've been doing, like trying to expand to practice, also thinking about systems thinking, and also going interprofessional, international. We have been publishing. We published this Nurse Educator special issue on some of these ideas for quality and safety. We also have every issue of posting of QSEN in the Journal of Continuing Education, and why QSEN competencies are so important for nurses in practice and for nurses in continuing education. Notably, one of our regional centers started a master's degree in healthcare quality and safety programs. This is just demonstrating how impactful our regional centers have been in thinking innovatively and creating products and programs to help the spread. One of our task forces has aligned with Sigma. They have on there now 3 webinars for academic clinical faculty on how to help them to teach and deliver high quality care. And then notably, one of our task forces, our DNP and Leadership Task Force, is aligned with the Ohio State University Fold Institute. And they did a webinar on the navigating the DNP project in academic and clinical settings, demonstrating the need for our DNPs to have quality improvement competence in their practice implementation projects that are a part of their DNPs. Another accomplishment is our academic task force that is led by Jerry Altmiller. And again, she now is a guest. That task force has a guest editorial in 2 journals, the Journal of the Nursing Education and then the Continuing Education Journal. So we have been very busy in the QSEN Institute across the nation and internationally on the spread of that mission and vision to really ensure that every nurse holds quality and safety in everyday delivery of care. And if we reflect back to the Erickson's developmental tasks and we think about what do adolescents need, some of you have kids at that age. We know adolescents need teams and friends and mentors, and they need a safe environment, and adolescents need communication tools. It's probably the iPhone, and maybe they have too much of that social media. However, if we're thinking of this and aligning this with our QSEN journey, what we need now are champions. So we need all of you to become champions of quality and safety, to really look at these competencies and say, yeah, how are these being delivered in my care delivery now? And how can I align with students who are on my floor, who know these, who are familiar with the QSEN competencies, and we can highlight them and label them and say, oh, hey, look, you're meeting the QSEN quality improvement competency by asking for our data on our unit on our falls rate. We need more sharing and more social networking with this movement so that this can be a strong North Star for nurses in the future. So as we grow into early adulthood, I think what we would like to do is expand our educational programs that we offer. We also would like more expansion in research in this area to demonstrate that by doing these competencies that we do in fact impact quality of care. We'd like more collaborative interdisciplinary work and maybe some possible forums in the future where we could be more interprofessional and talk about the different roles. So it takes a village to make a forward movement. Oh, wait, those are the village people. No, okay, yes, here it is. It does take a village for a movement to make an impact. And although QSEN has been on the movement trail for 12 years, there still are plenty of opportunities for all of you to get involved and to become committed that quality and safety be your North Star for your work ahead. We are always welcome to ideas. We have an email address and a website because we want to really grow. And as we grow old, we need you, the next generation, because we need to pass on these great accomplishments of how nurses have been making an impact in quality and safety. And we want the next generation to continue on this mission. So today I went over why QSEN. So why did we develop these quality and safety competencies? And, oh, so sorry, it's the top of the hour, so I'm getting all my alerts for the next thing to do. My apologies. Then the second thing we went over were all the QSEN competencies and what they mean in the beginning and what they now mean in practice. And then also the past and the present and the future to ignite all of you to get involved. You can get involved by submitting a practice strategy on our QSEN website or coming to our conference, which is Championing Quality and Safety in Academic Practice Partnerships in Philadelphia in May. And we are happy to have you submit an abstract, and the call for abstract is now open and will be open until January.
Thank you so much, Mary. Do we have any questions or comments from anybody listening in? If so, just type them in the chat box or the question box, and we'll be happy to go over those questions at this time.
Maybe while, if anybody is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Possibly while people are thinking of some questions, I also wanted to just state that we do have 15 task forces that range from practice task force, academic task force, simulation, task force that focuses on research, one that focuses on associate degree programs. We also have one for entrepreneurship and innovation, so that we can get more creative thinking at the front line, one on math skills, and one on policy. So those are some of our task forces. And then I also wanted to just share that we also are inspired by Florence Nightingale. She was really seen as one of the early quality improvement doers because of her work in the Crimean War, and that she collected data like we are focusing on with quality improvement. And in her data, she identified that the reason why the soldiers were dying was not because of the gunshot wounds, but because of the infection rates. And she demonstrated that through her data polar diagrams. And so she is actually acknowledged as probably one of the mothers of quality and quality improvement. And notably, her birthday is next year in May, and it's the 200th birthday of Florence Nightingale. And the World Health Organization is celebrating that as the Year of the Nurse. So we next year are also very excited to celebrate that at our conference. And I know there's going to be a lot of local celebrations too in Ohio to really embrace nursing, our profession, and how we make a difference because we are leaders. Any questions come up there, Jessica?
Well, I have a question. So could you tell us a little bit more about how one would get involved in those task forces?
Yes. If you send a message, an email message to me, and let me know what task force you might be interested in. My email is mary.dolansky, and it's if you want to put this in the chat box, Jessica, that would be probably the best.
Good idea.
So it's my first name, Mary, and then .Dolansky, DOLANSKY @case.edu.
All right.
And just let me know what you're interested in getting involved in, and I'll hook you up with the leader, and on the way you will go. And those task forces do all kinds of great things. They publish, they submit grants, they usually create an abstract for the conference, and then they usually meet at the conference and kind of talk about their areas of interest. And you never know what that task force might develop. Our end of BSN task force has published, I think, 10 articles on systems thinking, because they believe that in the programs that are teaching the associate's degrees to the baccalaureate degree, that the key to teach in those programs is systems thinking. So they published a lot of work in that area. So yeah, the task forces are doers and achievers. So we would welcome all of you to consider it, and let me know if you're interested.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I don't think we have any other questions at this time, but definitely if any of you listening in have any questions, feel free to email me or Mary at that email address, and we'll get those answered for you. If you are listening live, you'll get a follow-up email in about an hour or so with a link to your evaluation. And if you are listening in during, then the evaluation should be at the bottom of the page. So any questions, feel free to reach out to us at ONA. And thank you again, Mary, for this great webinar.
Oh, you're really very much welcome. I really am inspired by all of you, the nurses in Ohio who are making such a difference. So thanks to all the nurses.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.